Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We're going to have some fun with cyber here today. Cyber security, cyber insurance. Can I have a show of hands? Who is on the IT cyber side of the house? Anyone in the room on that? In their respective companies? Who is more operational, business? Okay. Who defines themselves as other? Okay. Okay. Very good. So it's good. It's good mix. Good mix in the audience. We'll start with an awareness of what we're here to talk about, which is the amount of risk that we all know to be out there. 450 billion. Has anyone seen numbers higher than that? Current numbers? Yeah. So this Hiscox report came out with this, and they just released their new number. It's now 600 billion of cyber crime that is going on right now, and with that comes a lot of nausea. Let's talk about 1 billion. 1 billion in losses from Target. Their cyber policy was 100 million, which was a factor of 1/10 of their loss. Obviously, no one spent a lot of time quantifying what their aggregate risk was. And the boards, half the board changed, C-suite. We all know this example. But it's 1 billion out of now 600 billion. But it's a real $1 billion. And that crime is real, and the losses are significant, and they're increasing. For the rest of the presentation, I'm going to go at kind of a fast pace. Lior and I are available for Q&A when we're done with our respective presentations. And then we're also available afterward for anyone, for conversations afterward. I'm also highly available on LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. The next slide. Speaking of being highly available, I've been an advocate of quantified cyber insurance. So if you Google IoT and nauseous and CIO, that's my Wall Street Journal article. I've been in the Journal a dozen times talking about how this IoT and these devices dramatically expand the attack surface. And there's no industry consensus on a cohesive umbrella strategy, as we all know. And there are a number of initiatives now starting to address that, and so it'll be interesting to track that. Over on the right, on the left, your left, Insurance Business Weekly started picking up some of my comments about 3 years ago because I took the first, and I know this is kind of a naughty word in some circles, but I took the first healthcare company in the United States to be 100% in the cloud. So not even a print server on site. Everything was in the cloud. VDI, everything. So in doing so, we were awarded the healthcare company in the US that had the highest level of resiliency, of cyber resiliency. So that was kind of an interesting task. And then I started understanding that even though we were the highest level of cyber resiliency for any healthcare company, we still had massive risk, which was quantified, presented to the board, and we had to transfer that risk outside the company because we weren't going to spend, as I calculated, 2 times top-line revenue to be fully secure and compliant with all aspects of every cyber framework. So we started doing investigations. Here's a cyber risk insurance application, which has very little to do with what you'll pay in a premium. Your answers to that. Very little. Okay. So what does the market look like today? It's a growing market. There are lots and lots of underwriters coming in every day. There are increasing capacity and limits. However, I suggest that if you have MacSure or you have any other entity quantify your cyber risk, whatever your cyber risk is in aggregate quantity is far times what you'll be able to get in terms of your cyber limit. So what does that mean? You can't buy enough cyber insurance to protect all your risk right now, at least if you quantify it. Capacity is aimed typically at larger insureds. There are a number of syndicates, self-insured, and on, lots of different vehicles. But the market is very small relative to where it's going to go. As someone who's been studying cyber insurance for the past 5 years, in a quantitative way, I have to say that every company that we have quantified, MacSure, and we have clients around the globe, every company is grossly underinsured in terms of quantified risk. So much so that if I could buy a pool of cyber insurance companies and all they did was cyber, I would go long on that with options as hard and fast as I could. Because the amount of cyber insurance that's going to be purchased in the next 5 or 10 years, once people start quantifying their aggregate risk, is going to go up dramatically. So what are the challenges? There's lack of standards. Insurance products are all over the place. We're in fact coming out with our own group of products. The management teams and the boards of the companies have historically lacked understanding of aggregate exposures because, again, it's not easy to quantify. There's all kinds of limits on budgets for cyber insurance. Some companies still don't have. Does anyone feel like raising their hand to attest to, in a public environment like this, that their company currently does not have any cyber policy? Is anyone interested in that? No? Okay. So cyber risk estimation pricing models are not well developed, and there are ambiguous questions. So if you Google, my name and insurance, cyber insurance, you'll see me blasting the industry about not having applications that correlate to premium. And then 2 years ago, we stopped doing that. We developed kind of an approach to kind of get around that. And there's very minimal verifications relative to the aggregate risk. One of the things that Lior and I are going to talk about is the tsunami, the cyber tsunami. Think of WannaCry times 100 or times 1,000. So cyber is very complex. There are a lot of policies that cover cyber, lots of different categories of cyber. So there's cyber, there's catastrophic, property and catastrophic loss, there's E&O, all different types of policies. There's dozens of policies that in some way or form address cyber. They also address this list of complex, interrelated sources of loss for a company. So when we think of cyber, we think of risk and we think of loss. We don't think of breach and hack. Kind of a different way of looking at it. We think of quantifying. But each of these loss categories, contingent business interruption, breach of privacy, all of these damages and losses. So lining up an insurance portfolio of policies on the table and then finding out how they interrelate and then where the exclusions are, that's one of the challenges resulting from a very complex environment. So the developments that we have is that there's an increasing amount of historical risk information. Insurance has been around for hundreds of, if not arguably thousands of years, and now cyber databases are becoming better so that underwriting processes can happen if you're looking at historical information for underwriting cyber risk, which there is an argument against doing that. Expanding the size of claims, improving standards, NIST, advances in technology, and this last item here on the list is really the segue into the rest of the presentation. Here we're talking about security ratings for risk assessment tools. Everybody here, I imagine, understands Dun & Bradstreet and Moody's, credit risk. So what about something for cyber risk? What about the notion of quantifying aggregate risk, putting it on a scale that the management team can understand, the board can understand, on a scale from 1 to 1,000? Would this be helpful for the industry to be able to do a peer review like we do with financial risk management and we do with supply chain risk management and have a standard in the industry that allows supply chain and peer review of cyber risk? What's the status of who I'm playing with? Right now, a lot of assessments are going on, and we partner with a lot of assessments companies to achieve this. But many companies find themselves red and orange. We have one client that's green. Quantification of risk like this has a complex algorithm, and that algorithm is based on industry standards, including assessing every computer, every router, every server. Is it patched up? Who knows about the inner workings of WannaCry? Right? So a known patch, right? A known issue with a known patch, and near catastrophic loss for many entities. So we look at that. This algorithm, this industry standard algorithm, also looks at network penetration testing, inside out, outside in, processes frameworks, cyber frameworks, NIST 82, 153, and also 3 categories of other. So just like Moody's, just like Dun & Bradstreet, it makes sense for all of us as an industry, ICS, to have a meaningful, relevant standard. NIST, at the core of what we're doing, what we're suggesting. Anyone here ever read 853? Could I have a show of hands? 853? Okay. $853 in all of its glory.
Is it named like that because of the number of the pages?
So I started becoming really interested in frameworks when I took that healthcare company to the cloud, because a lot of my peers at the time said, because of this document, you could not go to the cloud with a healthcare company. Does anyone know what this is? Yeah. Does anyone read it? Okay, I did twice. Okay, in 1996, they didn't mention anything about the cloud. Word's not in there. I was so devastated because all my friends were telling me I couldn't do what I was doing because of the word that wasn't in there. But we have 50 different cyber frameworks, GDPR, embedded into our system, allowing a kind of a standardization across all companies. And I think if the industry is going to have a standard of scoring, then it's going to have a capability to use not only our artificial intelligence, big data gathering, but also the ability to adhere to and measure and quantify risk based on all these frameworks. So at the end of the day, if you quantify risk for your company, and I suggest you all do, because I don't know how you're setting budgets, cyber budgets, without quantifying risk, how would you do that? How would you set a budget without knowing what your risk is in dollars? How do you know how much insurance to buy unless you quantify the risk? How do you know what to retain, or as the industry says, go naked on without quantifying risk? So quantify the risk, set aside a dollar amount for mitigation, set aside a dollar amount for transferring that risk, and then the notion of predictability is very much a part of any algorithm that quantifies risk. And of course, as we all know, predictability leads to the elimination and certainly the reduction of risk. So most of our pies are very large right now. I happen to like apple rhubarb pie, but these kind of pies don't taste very good because they're very, very big in terms of risk. So what the process of aggregating risk allows you to do and quantifying it is it allows you to have meaningful discussions as opposed to opinions. How many of us have been involved in discussions? We need more budget. IT needs more budget. Cyber needs more budget. Clint, have you ever heard cyber needs more budget? Yeah. Fantastic prezo earlier today. Can't wait to see all of it. But look, quantifying risk is the first step in terms of mediating the contentious nature of boardroom discussions, CFOs arguing with CISOs, right? How many CISOs don't think that their company has enough budget? Why is it an opinion, or it should be fact? So today's presentation about cyber insurance is a fact-based quantified approach. Okay, let's look at specific coverages: loss, damaged equipment, safety, cyber insurance. That you could even have a policy that all it does is it flies people in to clean up, no damages, we're just a cleanup crew. That's all we're going to insure for, and we're a very good cleanup crew. That can be the most valuable cyber insurance dollar. It depends on the insurer. There's no really consensus in terms of ICS for cyber insurance. Please be wary of exclusions. Lots of exclusions. Has anyone mapped out all of the exclusions and all of their policies that relate to cyber? Anyone? Can I have a show of hands? Okay. So how do you know what's covered, and how do you know what your exclusions are, and how do you know what your premium should be? These things are part of the quantification process, and insurers are increasingly wanting to use exclusions to write higher limits. And what is that delicate balance between higher limits, premium, and these exclusions? Is anyone here, with a show of hands, fully prepared for a claim in terms of cyber? In other words, is the claim team ready to go? Is it identified in advance? This is very important. Documenting events, so to speak, immediately as they're occurring and then after they're occurring in terms of how quickly you're remediating. One of the variables we look at in terms of quantifying cyber risk for any company is MTTR, mean time to remediation. How good is a company at dealing with these threats? Kind of wrapping up this part, Lloyd's and other companies, we're working with Lloyd's, Lior is working with Lloyd's, there's lots of people working with Lloyd's and others, we're working with a number of other underwriters, but they have these tsunami-like predictions and these tremendous assessments. So the way these companies work is that they look at these hypothetical outages impacting maybe 93 million people here with this study, and what the economic impact could be with a particular event. WannaCry times 1,000. WannaCry actually ended up being very profitable for the bad actors. Very profitable. It was easy. It was a known hack. A lot of people. Anyone here running 2003 that wants to raise their hand? 2000, come on. Oh, okay, we got some bold people there. Take a note of that, Lior, will you please? Right there, row 3. So these breaches ultimately will happen. There will be a tsunami. We're not predicting it. We're just kind of confident that's going to happen. So how much risk does an insurance company take on itself? How much do you have in terms of reinsurance? These are all things that need to be addressed in that. These catastrophic exclusions are typical in terms of these policies. And if you can get a policy that doesn't exclude based on catastrophic loss, you're winning. If you can get a policy that mirrors your aggregate risk that you've quantified in dollars, you're winning. And so our hope is that that by quantifying risk, we'll be closer to addressing these issues. And with that, I'll hand it over to Lior.
So, hey everybody, Lior Frenkel, CEO and co-founder of Waterfall Security. Shawn just did a great job in explaining how complex insurance is. So I'll try to move us from, complex to chaotic. In these days, ICS cyber is chaotic. It's relatively new, and from insurance perspective, we just don't have enough history. We can't calculate enough to predict stuff, and prediction is, as Shawn said, a big part of the solution. Part of the chaos is because the attack technologies are changing all the time. The bad guys and good guys are inventing new attack technologies, new vectors of attacks, new scenarios of how you can attack a target, and it changes all the time. Even the motivation is changing. And why do we care about the motivation? It used to be a nation-state play. We had the Chinese or the Americans or the Russians or the Israelis, all of their governments building up cyber armies and stuff. But and now we have criminals and ransomware. So why do we care? Because we care because when it was a nation-state play, the targets were mainly, in our world, they were mainly critical national infrastructures. Now that we moved to the criminal area, everybody's a target. If you have money and I can get it, you're a target. So now we have smaller, unregulated, totally private type of customers that are targets, need security and needs insurance. We moved from something which is relatively rare. Thank God we don't have cyber warfare. There's no regular cyber terror attacks day by day. When we moved to, the criminal part, attacks are happening daily. It's a regular thing now. And the consequences changed because of the motivation. It's now not only the ability to damage your site or production or to gather intel. Now it's the ability to get your money back, to get the money from you back to us. And of course, the outcome is very different depending on the target site. The attacks make a totally different type of outcome if we're talking about an offshore platform than an automotive manufacturing site. All of this adds to the chaos, and the bottom line is, if we cannot really quantify the risk, we can't get real insurance. It doesn't matter how we call it and how they market it and what we sign on. At the end, we are not really covered against anything meaningful because we can't really quantify the risk. What works here? This?
To the right.
So naturally, we lean to technology to help us in this regard too. But in reality, most of the technologies that we are using just don't help us in this regard. They don't stop enough of the breaches. They don't solve enough of the problem. Just as an example, all of the remote control attacks that you ever heard of got in through the perimeter firewall, okay, like by design. So it doesn't work enough. It doesn't solve enough. Intrusion detection systems, security monitoring systems, important technologies, very useful, but they don't prevent those breaches. They give us data to do the aftermath, to prepare for the next one, to know how to stop it from happening again, this exact one. But again, they don't stop enough. Antiviruses, security updates, all of the signature-based or activity-based, most of them, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, this is what they do, but thinking of this in the perspective of insurance, they defend against yesterday's attacks, against known attacks. They don't help us predict the future. None of these add the ability to measure and calculate risk better, so they don't help us in the quest for a real cyber insurance policy. So there is actually a technology that do prevent. Waterfall technology, unidirectional security gateway, is an alternative to firewalls that comes in as the perimeter security for control systems, enabling secure way to connect control networks to the outside world, to the business networks, to third parties, to the cloud, but eliminates any risk of anything getting back in through that connection. This means that we eliminated the remote control or the remote control attack and put it off the table, leaving mainly physical attacks with physical access, insider threats, and things like that, which are very important, which are very problematic and can end with very harsh consequences. But again, going back to insurance, removing remote control attacks removed a very big unknown from the table. Staying where the biggest threat that we have now is physical access attacks and insiders makes the insurance company much more comfortable. This is an area where they are much more comfortable with. This is something that they know how to treat. Much easier. And let's say the textbook example of what I just said is CNA, a very big insurance company here in the States, together with THB, which is a part of the Lloyd's Syndicate out of London, wrote a cybersecurity policy for sites which are protected by Waterfall's technology. And what's very impressive about this coverage, plus the fact that they have our name in it, is that it has a very big coverage at a relatively low premium, and the exclusion, which Shawn told us to be very wary of, are very limited. This policy covers cyber loss and damages. The cost of repairs of the machines and everything. A business interruption, you have downtime because of the attack, it's covered. Extortion cost. This policy covers ransomware on cyber attacks. Okay, it's unique. I haven't found any other policy that provides that. It excludes, of course, acts of war, which is, I think, all of any insurance does, but it includes acts of terrorism, which, again, in our field is unique. And the reason they can give you such a wide cover with such low exclusions is because of predictability. Because this type of technology, when it deployed right in the right places, removes so many unknowns, puts you back into the place where insurance plays well, and now they can provide meaningful insurance that will really, save you at the end if bad things happen. This concludes my part of the session. Both Shawn and I, as Shawn said, will be available after this call and later. We are both really tall guys, so you can see us from the far and find us. And if there are any questions or anything, we're available now too. And thank you for joining the session, and I hope you enjoyed all the carbs that you ate here. And thank you.
Are there any questions? I have some, but I don't know if anybody here
There's
has
a
one.
question back in the left, right here.
Oh, Dave, do you have a mic? Dave?
Hi there. Thank you very much. I was fascinated by your the 30% discount on the policy for using Waterfall. Do you know, are there other technologies or vendors where they give discounts like that? And then have the claims have borne that out? Like basically this was worth it. It was a genuine discount that should have been there, or what does the evidence show once the claims have come in?
Okay, so thank you. First of all, again, as far as I know, and I'm not an insurance expert, but I have never seen another, or at least, and they claim that there is no other comparable cyber insurance with this level of discount. So I think the answer for that is yes. And this is relatively new. The policy is available since sometime mid-2017-ish. So there's not enough data to answer your question, at least not yet. So, but they did their homework, and I'm sure that they are not planning to lose on this. So it should be okay.
Question?
Good afternoon. I am Balasubramaniam from Reliance Industries, India. Recently, we engaged in the cyber policies for comprehensive assessment, including the production damage that can happen because of the attack on distributed control systems, and also the silent towers damage. Specifically, a unique phenomenon in the offshore industry is that there is an insurance divide between onshore and offshore. Can you throw some light on that? Because there is exclusions and inclusions, generally they.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're going to do, is this live? Is this live?
Yeah.
Okay. So so what that's a combination of is you're experiencing a intersection of maritime insurance as well as terrestrial insurance, and then you have also other variables in the equation that relate to maritime that you can insure for pirates and attacks on the rigs. So that's part of the difference. The other part of the difference is that this is so new. The underwriters have been challenged to develop schema that relates to risk. So how do I quantify the risk as it relates to cyber? Because I think your question is kind of related to cyber as it relates to the offshore drilling. Is that correct? Yeah. So you've got maritime, you've got terrestrial, that's coming together. You've got cyber, which is brand new, and it just makes things uneasy. There, of course, have been some incidents, as you may be aware, and as these incidents come forward and as the limits get hit on policies that coverage applies to, then I think more data will be available. There are niche providers out there that are looking at that space, and they may have even launched already into that space, that are delivering specific products to address that, and I'm happy to talk afterward.
Any other questions?
Okay, we have a left side of the room question over here. We have a front row question. We'll go left side first.
I asked this question earlier. This is Mark Eitzman with Rockwell Automation, but I wanted to find out, are there some sort of data or correlating reports that would associate or correlate cybersecurity risk with financial risk? In other words, Wall Street definitely has to have a stake in this. When you see the impact, with profitability, that, I've listened to, quarterly earnings reports, and it seems the analysts on those calls don't bring this up. They bring up everything else, every little attribute of the company, yet this isn't something that you hammer, they hammer the executives on.
Right.
And then essentially then report to the rest of the financial institutions out there that are discussing what, the risk associated with investing in this company.
Right, that's exactly right. Good, very good question. So I'm gonna back up a little bit, and we're gonna take a look. Okay, so the number one question by every board member to start out every internal board call right now is cyber. Where are we at with cyber? Oh, we've got these reports. We're tracking that report. Lots of reports. Okay, but no one really knows where they're at in terms of a quantified fashion. This risk is not on the books, so the SEC has not moved forward and required that cyber risk be put on the books as a liability like a financial risk would. That is going to happen at some point. There are two Democratic federal representatives out of California that have proposed legislation injecting some authority within the SEC to start looking at that. But you're on the cusp, and next time, Sid, by the way, Sid, congratulations on a fantastic event. Next year, there's going to be real specific information. When we do this panel next year, there's going to be a lot of more information about how this information that was just asked in that question, mark my words, that is going to be suggested, and it will bubble up in terms of the flow of what the SEC is going to require. Because how can you make a transaction on Wall Street without quantifying that risk? Because we all know it's on the book. We all know it's there. It's just not on the books, right? Right. So great question, and Sid's taking a note right now. We're gonna have that as part of next session, next year. Yes, we have a question right here.
Yeah. So I was looking at some of the input that you all used in terms of standards, et cetera, for determining premiums and underwriting. Are you all using the ISA IEC 62443 standards yet?
That is one that we're ingesting as we speak. Yeah, and that's so important that, so when we measure risk, we take a look at not only one framework. Usually companies need to have multiple frameworks applied, and that is definitely one. So you can take that one along with others, and if you're international, so you could have GDPR and that and others, PCI, et cetera. So typically, it's our client base does not use just one. And it doesn't make sense to just have, there's not one framework that does it all for any entity, right? And then, one of the things that Clint and I were talking about at the break, it really relates to, and by the way, we're working very closely with DHS and Secret Service and Cyber Secret Service, but it really what that question gets to is, what are the security controls by which any company should measure itself, right? Because all the frameworks have overlap, but then they also have some uniqueness. And so the first step in the process, Clint, I think you were suggesting this earlier, is identification of which security controls. Is that right? Yeah.
There's some guy there.
We have a question in the back, white shirt.
I think this one's for Shawn. Are you guys working with the Underwriters Laboratory who are trying to grade devices as to their security and actually factor that into your equation?
So absolutely. We initiated conversations a couple of years ago, and may have pushed. We had a conversation with the CISO of General Electric, and then through that UL. But absolutely. So, look, what happened with certification of devices is going to happen in terms of cyber. Now, our approach that we're suggesting is different from what UL is looking at right now. We're not looking at a one-time certification. We score devices. So we've been hired by clients to score a device into perpetuity because the device profile changes. Okay, so chips. Chips are being hacked, right? So these devices, BIOS level, everything changes constantly. So we've got more discussion to happen. I think as an industry, we have more discussion to make sure that the right type of work is being done with the interests of the users. Yeah, great question.
We don't take comments.
No
just
rebuttals. No rebuttals. Rebuttals are at the bar tonight.
No rebuttal. So I'm managing director of the ISA Security Compliance Institute. It's a consortium with stakeholders, including end users, certification bodies, tool suppliers. We've been certifying control system products since 2011. We're certifying them against the ISA IEC 62443 standards. We do certification against versions, and we also certify the security development lifecycle processes. So it's not a one-time cert. So if a product's certified, we audit the supplier's lifecycle practices to confirm that they continue to keep their security capabilities. So it's a good model. It's been in place. We've been improving it over the years. So 2011 was the first year, and so it's 2018. So it's not as well known as UL, but we've been around. We have great labs. The labs that are doing the work are like TUV Rhineland, one of the biggest in the world. They have about 20,000 employees. A lab here based in the U.S., a lab in Japan, and we're bringing on CSA Group in Canada. So some of this is being done, probably worth a look-see.
Well, that's a great, Sid, congratulations again for having an event where everybody, who's involved in the space just comes together.
Is there another question?
Yeah.
If not, I'll have one.
Yeah.
This is Tim Salisbury with LyondellBasell. I was curious, the 30% discount for the Waterfall solution, are the terms and conditions for that publicly available, or is that something for a unique individual contract? The reason I'm asking is I'm kind of curious where you would have to put the unidirectional gateway in order to get those terms? For example, is it separating your complete control system or perhaps just separating your safety system from your DCS? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, on some I can, on some I can't. The policy is public. This is actually a copy of, the policies book. So I think it's even public on their website, or if not, I can send you a link for it. And all of the terms and conditions are there. At the level of a policy, they don't detail exactly how to use it because of the complexity of each of the sites. But at the end, the idea here is removing remote control attacks, removing the fact that stuff can get in from the internet and propagate into the site that you are protecting. If you are deploying the Waterfall technology in a way that works like that, you're good. But they won't detail that, as no insurance company actually says how to use these types of technology.
Over here.
Mike Radigan with Lido Cyber. So I have two questions. The first one's for Sid. It has to be a one-word answer. Is it possible to quantify cyber risk?
No. No.
No, it's impossible, yeah. So I presented at a session where I gave a case
And
study.
I asked him questions.
Yeah, we kind of.
I would say yes, and we're doing it every day.
Well,
And we
that's
have
what I
some
say. I'm-
global 50 brands that are lining up.
I am in your camp. So you did note that these great frameworks that we have are really just illustrating the control conditions. So that's an input into your, what I'm calling right now a black box, so I don't know what your algorithm
Yeah,
is.
one of 6 variables, yes, categories of
One or
variables.
6 categories, right.
Yeah.
But the foundation of any good risk analysis has to be a model. So are you employing any published or otherwise used risk analysis model that we would recognize? Or what's the foundation of your risk analysis so that we would have faith in the output of your algorithms?
So yes, we are making that available for our clients and under NDA right now. We're still wrapping up our IP filings. The company's 2.5 years old. The algorithm started 5 years ago with my co-founder and I. And the underwriters are fully aware that we're working with, are fully aware of what the model is. And so that's why it's getting adoption in the marketplace. In terms of publishing it, there's things like Coca-Cola that don't have patents that are copywritten. Those discussions are going on in terms of, copyrights last for longer than patents do, right? So all of that's going on right now. But, perhaps next year, Sid, there'll be a different answer to the question in next year's cyber insurance session.
Well, just because I had kind of a setup question there, I thought. But because risk management is one of the things I was into a
Yes.
lot because I have a PhD and that kind of stuff. And I was going to ask the question, the thing with risk management in cybersecurity is, as you had a slide that was up there that's now gone, the pie chart with mitigate, accept, and insure, and it was kind of a joint question here. Let me ask this to Lior, then I'm going to ask you a different kind of question. But anyhow, what I didn't understand is, I get the point, Lior, we've spoken so many times, where that does quantify stuff. But in a way, if I'm just surprised you didn't say it gets rid of the need to mitigate, it gets rid of the need to insure. I mean, if you have no possible problem, why would you even think of insuring? You know what I'm saying? But where I'm just, the way you framed it, I was just kind of surprised.
So first of all, I'm happy that you're reading all of my marketing stuff. but we are not removing all of the risk altogether. You
Just
still
the
have
perimeter.
risks. We are removing one big part of the risk, which is remote control attacks, which is virus propagation, with its access from the internet. That's what we're removing. All the rest. Again, insider attacks, physical access attacks, and all of those, you still have them, you still own them, you still need to protect against. So it's, and you still need to insure against. But now you can insure
in a much better way than before, where everything is a big spaghetti and the insurance companies can't predict anything.
Because you've eliminated certain class of risks.
Yes.
So therefore,
Yeah.
you're just insuring against what's left, in essence. And
in
the
essence.
risk that maybe something else happens.
Yes,
Yeah, I
of
get
course,
that, I get that.
of course.
But Shawn, with respect to your model, the one thing that
Yes.
Mike was bringing up and was just, you know, whenever I've been involved with risk management, and I know Mike too, it's got to do where you go there and you know, everybody says you should make your investments, you should be managing your risks, okay? And to do that, you have to somehow quantify it. And I'm not saying you can't quantify it. It doesn't mean that what you're quantifying is any different than the way other people. I don't know your model, so I'm not criticizing or anything or promoting it. But I mean, I certainly can understand how you can come up with a score and stuff like that. But the one thing that I was just wondering is, usually I think the model is used, and I think, Mike, the model we talked about previously, was really something you go in, and I did a contract, I had some custom work I did for a very, very large company about cyber risk management. And the real question there was, he was asking about compensatory controls and ways to mitigate. And we ended up developing a little thing based upon saying, if this is the risk, these are the options to mitigate. But what I found when I did that, as soon as you put in a defense, a compensatory control, all of a sudden your risk goes down, right? I mean, that's the reason you put it in. I'm just wondering, so, you know, and people want a model like that because the real question usually is it worthwhile to do this or not do this? Or if I have 5 options I can do, which one reduces the risk more versus the cost? I mean, that's kind of the thing. So I'm just wondering how dynamic it is versus going in and doing a risk assessment saying, given the world the way it is today, what you have, this is your level of risk, versus here's a tool that I can use to say, what if I did this? What if I did that? What if I put in a unidirectional gateway? What if I don't? You know, in between the safety systems. I'll get away from the other issue.
Well, that's exactly what Lior and I were talking about and have been talking about. Look, when you bring in the waterfall solution and your risk pie goes down, then that's an advantage to everybody and everything. It's 1953 and it's FICO, right? So, you know, who knew that, you know, 75 years later, that would be, you know, very, very important in terms of how we're all looking at each other as partners, as suppliers, as vendors, as M&A. So this is new. I think we can all agree and shake our heads, yes, that quantification of cyber risk, you know, with a industry standard metric is kind of a new thing.
And it's and you're only doing it for the purpose for insuring.
No. I mean, we launched the company with insurance in mind, but the company has a number of, you know, our clients are just using it to measure, manage, and mitigate their risk. We've been providing insurance consulting and helping them get higher limits. Let me tell you what, a lot of people initially think when they think of cyber insurance consulting, they think, oh my gosh, how can you help me get my premium down? The real nugget in the equation is, how do I get my limit up? Because guess what? Every one of your companies is underinsured by multiple factors, you know, maybe 10, 20 times. And so that's really the big thing is, how do I get my limit up? And only with confidence and trust. And with trust, when you bring in a solution that takes this big hunk off the table, then that's why, you know, CNA and others, I think this is the waterfall policy will be heavily adopted.
Another question, follow-up? Unless somebody else has a question, I'm sorry.
Oh,
back
there's
there.
one here. There's one here.
I'll let the others ask questions. My job's to let them ask questions.
Why we're going in the back of the room up front in the red shirt? Why don't you?
Oh, there's somebody here.
Yep, okay.
Depends
I'll be happy to carry it over
Yeah,
there.
thank you. I got it. I just got it.
Thank you. My name is Robert Sammons. I'm with Global, and my background is in process safety and automation. I'm curious to know, with your tools, does it utilize inferential analysis and statistical process fault analysis to determine these faults, or is it strictly an algorithm based on linear algebraic terms?
Well, it's the former.
Okay.
We're using artificial intelligence, neural networks, heavy quants on our team, PhDs, both domestic and abroad. One of our board advisor members is Vince Trulia, who ran Moody's Sovereign Risk Unit for 15 years. He was, now he's working for Putin and the Minister of Finance, developing a new risk scoring system for equities in Russia. So we're looking at this from a, we're taking the standards that were made at Moody's and D&B and applying that kind of evergreen approach, which is, I think, part of your comment, or part of your question related to, how evolving is it going based on the math and the principles. There are other things like copula theory and correlations that are also being employed. So, I mean, I don't want to, freak out and get the audience, but I'm happy to anyone know about copula theory and Diffie-Q and things? Okay, so yeah, we'll do a separate breakdown session.
In my last question, I guess I had two questions. One was about your method of minimum evidence to determine faults, which I'm quite familiar with. But the other question around process safety is utilizing fundamental principles around quantitative and qualitative risk assessment, which everyone in here keeps tap dancing around. But my question to you is the what-if principle, utilizing that as a qualitative assessment. And then finally, how do you determine proven and use variables to identify what we'd call a layer of protection analysis around cybersecurity as it relates to insurability and risk mitigation and gap closure?
Right. So I'll take the first question first. In terms of quantifying the risk and looking at quantitative and qualitative variables, we're public in disclosing right now 3 of the 6 categories of data that we're collecting. We're looking at the other 3 as well, and off stage and with the proper paperwork. I think we can kind of go through some of that right now. But the market's reacting very favorably towards this kind of concept. Look, whether it's Maxure and our M-score or some other solution, all of the companies represented by all of the people in this room and at the conference at some point will have a quantified risk. Again, it's 1953, 1957, and we're looking at FICO. We're looking at a way for a bank to write a loan without having to go to the minister, pastor, whatever of that person and look at their neighbors and things like that. So that's what's happening now when an M&A occurs, right? So the quants come in and they look at what the risk profile is on the cyber side. Relative to the second half of the question, I don't want to take up the whole presence. Why don't we break off and go through that? But let's just say that those are the variables in the equation that need to get answered in order to price out limit. And not only are we pricing out limits, but we're also pricing out portfolio limits. So if you're looking at multiple entities within a given industry, ICS is what we're working on actively. What if we insured 80 ICS entities, what's the aggregate limit of that portfolio, and how do you develop a multi-billion-dollar reinsurance vehicle outside of standard solutions? Yes?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood the starting time, so I missed the first half, so maybe you addressed it. But
is this recorded, Sid? Sid, are we recorded?
But here's the question. In terms of your uninsured cyber risk, I've heard estimates anywhere from $300 billion to $1 trillion. So you have number one. The related question is what percent of the cyber risk actually are insured? I've heard it's barely 1%.
Right. So I love the question. If Waterfall is introduced, those numbers go down. And at the end of the day, we're using math to get closer to the truth about resiliency, and the truth gets you closer to, goodness. And we're trying to deliver actually almost a patriotic sense within the culture of our company to deliver resiliency in the face of the things that Lior was saying about these pirates and these criminals. It's really pirate, material out there. So all of that needs to happen as a country and as partners around the world. We need to have a higher level of resilience, and I think that's one of the reasons why Lior and I are so passionate about having these initiatives successful, because without quantification of risk, incorrect decisions get made. Who here can say that all of the right decisions in terms of cyber expenditures have been made within their company, right? So, once things are quantified and the right solutions become available, then those risks go down. Earlier, I did say that if I could buy a pool of insurance companies and all those insurance companies did was sold cyber, I would mortgage, sell everything I had, and put it in there, borrow, beg, because every company that we've measured, that we've quantified cyber risk, it's way under. I mean, right there, Target was a factor of 10, but the numbers we're seeing are even way higher. Up front.
Thank you. My name is Tim Feldman. I'm with ISA, and I have a question for Lior. And I think back to Y2K and what drove CEOs and CFOs to spend all the money they did to certify to whoever they were certifying to that they were prepared for that clock to strike midnight. Is there any correlation there between that risk and cyber risk and where the pressure will come from eventually? Because cyber risks have been around for quite some time, as we know.
Well, yeah, cyber risk in general has been there since the first virus, I think, went on. But at least the area that we are active in, which is the cyber risk for industrial control system, that hasn't been around so long ago. You can see it by all of the parameters, the number of vendors, the number of consultancy companies, the number of events out there. It's depending on how you where you wanna put your threshold. It's a few years old market. So a few years old market is new. Most of our customers are old customers. These sites go for tens of years, for 30 years, they are there. So it's relatively new, and the biggest impact on this, put aside the fact that customers need more awareness and they need more understanding on what they're up against in the real world, and what they can do to reduce the risk, is how they can quantify it so insurance companies can come in and give them good insurance. It's very early in the market for that.
Very early. Yeah, you were right about the date. 1986, boot sector virus, I think, is the one you were speaking of.
Yeah.
First one to be out in the public domain. So 31 years later, here we are with, but let's say this, financial risk, did the Egyptian rock cutter have some risk when he bought some knives or something, and 3,000 years ago? There has been financial risk throughout, and only FICO and D&B and Moody's are within the last 100 years. So it is new.
Are there any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, and join me. I want to thank the speakers.